Welcome back to CEO Money. I'm Michael Yorba, your host. Thanks for joining us. All right, we've got Lisa Pryor, founder, CEO, Pryor Consulting. Lisa, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me today.
My pleasure. All right, give our audience a little feel for you, and then let's get into what you're doing at Pryor Consulting that's changing the way people succeed.
Great. Thanks so much for the chance to talk about this. Work has been so important to me for the past 2 decades. Here at Pryor Consulting, our work has been leadership coaching and change consulting because, Michael, as so many of your listeners know, it's a really volatile, complex world out there, and the way that we do work, the way that organizations are organized and getting work done through people is changing dramatically. And so we help leaders with that work.
Okay. You work with nonprofits, Fortune 500 organizations.
Yes, I work with a range because, as you can imagine, these topics of leadership and change really are affecting organizations, whether they're small nonprofits or large multinational companies. And we do work with all ranges. Our particular sweet spot has been with the sort of more mid-sized companies that are in that really big growth spurt where they have to take leaders need to bring themselves and their people to that next level of performance.
Okay. One of the things that you're called to actions, if you will, or your mantras is you're shifting employees to entrepreneur from being an entrepreneur to being a doer and being a manager and a planner and growing your organization. Give our audience a feel for that flow, because that's everybody's dream, to be able to go from A to Z on this, but be effective and not burn bridges or have poke too many people in the eye while you're doing it.
That's exactly right. It's a journey, whether you are already in a management leadership role or you're an employee who's aspiring to be in one. And Michael, I call this, it's a mindset journey from being a producer to manager and leader. And the reality in today's work environment is even the CEO in the corner office, if they're still having a corner office, because so many are, creating these dynamic workspaces, have to wear those 3 hats and do that work simultaneously, produce and manage and lead. And how do you allocate your time and energy to those 3 roles? What are you more drawn to? What we find is that especially for managers, their managers and leaders at all levels tend to continue to hold on to work that's not theirs uniquely to do anymore. They have to let it go in order for themselves to grow and for their people to grow, and have to kind of rebalance the producing and leading particularly. And the point you were making about how do you do that in a way that's a win-win relationship is really by bringing empathy for others to that role.
Okay. Are you finding more people in leadership that are getting out of that corner office and moving more into the community of their environment?
I think that especially in the sort of less traditional, the younger kinds of firms, absolutely, you're seeing a much more fluid, open floor plan. I think what's interesting, Michael, is that even in a world where we're so connected, online and through so many different kinds of media, you can have WebEx meetings and reach people in different countries. But what's interesting is a number of organizations, I think, are finding it that there's a human component to the work we do, and they want people together. And I think what we're starting to see, I talk about how the future of work is here, and the future of work is that organizations are going to become smaller and smaller in terms of the number of jobs that they have, and those core people are going to not only be more and more part of the organization, but we're seeing in some cases some trends where co-location, being in the same place for those core people matters. So yes, seeing more of that sort of democratizing, if you will, in the workplace.
Now you mentioned empathy. I imagine that goes both ways. You've got to be able to develop that on both sides to have an effective team, cohesive, and then really want to do the 110% effort. there's got to be some simple guidelines for people to be able to go from being I'm the visionary, I'm the leader, I'm the guy that writes a check to, hey, I may be the visionary, but I can't do it without you.
That's you. You hit the nail on the head. And what is especially important for CEOs and for leaders to realize is there's actually a real, I think we're reaching a sort of crisis level in terms of how people feel about their workplace. So, for example, we've known for decades now that employee disengagement is a problem. We know that employee surveys on average tell us that up to 70% of a workforce don't feel connected to the work. But there have been some recent studies conducted by institutes that focus on mental health that are showing that numbers like 65% of people feeling significant stress and disconnection in the workplace. So your point about empathy is really important. Understanding from the leader's perspective what we're asking of people. And I think that the organizations that are going to win in this future of work are the ones that are going to meet their people halfway in redefining what it means to be part of an organization. So what that means is you're going to give tools and resources to your people so that they can take charge of their own careers and lives, encourage them to create a vision for their life, but meet them halfway by giving them career development tools that enable them to be entrepreneurial in your workplace.
Let's stop. What do you mean by that? Give them career development tools.
Yes. So a number of things, and they don't cost a lot of money, and they don't even cost a lot of time, and especially when you consider how much time and productivity gets lost at a water cooler when, those numbers of 65% of people feeling stressed or disengaged. So what I mean by career tools are this. First of all, there are so many cool ways that companies try to attract employees. You know the stories of the Silicon Valley companies and their foosball tables and gyms. But, at the end of the day, the companies that are going to win are the companies where managers are creating an environment where people are deliberately developed, as some folks are starting to talk about. In other words, you're using the job as an opportunity to help people grow. What that means in practical day-to-day terms is you're looking at coaching people not as these hour-long sessions that you have to call people into a room, but really right in the moment of work. Someone's just finished a presentation. Take 5 minutes. How'd you feel about that? What could you have done differently? These are just those taking advantage of those teachable moments. That's a career tool because what you're helping people do is see that their job is an asset. Their job is a development opportunity. Some other simple tools, you can encourage a mindset change where managers don't have to be the only people who are coaching employees. You can encourage your employees to coach each other. Peers, mentoring peers. This is another rising trend that's really taking hold because the workplace is too busy. We can't just put everything on managers' shoulders. But leaders, CEOs, you have to set that tone for that development culture in your organization.
Lisa, let's take a break right now and come back on the other side of this commercial break and continue the conversation. I've got 1,000 more questions for you.
Great, Michael. Thanks.
We'll be right back with Lisa Pryor, founder, CEO, Pryor Consulting, PryorConsulting.com. Segment is brought to you by Lots of Yachts. Welcome back to CEO Money. I'm Michael Yorby, your host. Thanks for being here. All right, we have got Lisa Pryor on the show with us right now. She is the founder and CEO of Pryor Consulting, PryorConsulting.com. All right, Lisa, let's pick up from where we left off. We were talking about being able to come together as a team, but still be the leader, take the leadership role, but doing it in a way that brings their passion out. One of the things we didn't talk about in the last segment I want to bring up is you were saying that people become disengaged. They become separated from their work, and it's been my experience, when somebody becomes disengaged, two things are happening. Either they really got hurt by the wrong communication skills from leadership, or maybe sometimes peers, but not so much, or they really shouldn't be there because there's no passion in what they do. So help me out with that.
Yeah, it's a really essential point. And what's fascinating, Michael, is that we have started to talk about engagement. We've been talking about engagement as a top-down sort of idea, and meaning what can companies do to engage people more? And I think you just pinpointed a really powerful idea, because what's fascinating is we should also be talking to employees about how can they create their own engagement. And certainly when a person's professional passions overlap with what an organization needs, you're going to get the best engagement. But employees kind of aren't really sure always how to take advantage of their current job to create work and to sort of meet the organization halfway. And your point was about communication skills, and it's a really great point. That in itself is a development opportunity. We see people leaving organizations either because they don't like their boss or they don't like their peers, and studies show us that almost 50% of people are feeling tension at any point with a peer. That in itself is a development opportunity, figuring out what is it about this other person and the way that they think or do that's so different from you. How could you learn to adjust your approach? What are the things you could learn about yourself? What are the tools? So it's a great example of actually creating your own engagement, understanding what's not working, and finding ways and people and colleagues who can help you improve that.
All right, now let's drill down on that one. How do you understand what's not working? There is a process that's been worked out where there's some simple rules that you could say, well, try this, because if you don't understand the problem, you can never solve it.
Yeah. So, let's start with some practical things that a person can do. Certainly, organizations in the past have used annual performance reviews, which have to be dreaded universally around the planet by just about everyone, including the bosses who have to write them. And in today's world, those performance reviews used to take place every year, and a year now it's like a decade. So what we need to do is, if we're not getting it from our bosses, if we're not getting it from our organizations, we have to go out and we've got to get feedback, because the point you just made is really important. How do I know what's wrong? I can't figure out what I'm doing. Find a few people that you trust. And ask for their feedback. Even though we're talking about how people feel disengaged, there's always someone you might be able to take out for lunch or have a phone conversation with if they work virtually or remotely from you, to understand just some very simple things. When you see me being my best self, what are those situations? And when am I not bringing my best self to a situation? And what could I be? What would your suggestions be for doing something differently? And I promise you that kind of people want to help, and getting that kind of feedback can be really useful.
We've got a few more minutes left. I want to get to the book that you wrote, Take Charge of Your View, Career Advice You Won't Get from Your Boss. Why did you write the book, and give a synopsis so people can get a feeling for going and buying the book?
Yeah, no, I love talking about this book. So Take Charge of Your View, Career Advice You Won't Get from Your Boss. It's right there in the title. This is a 6-week journey. I wrote it for people who work in organizations. And what's fascinating is it's a journey you can take to really mine your current job as a development opportunity. The 6 weeks takes you through 18 experiences. I encourage you to find someone to do the book with, because it's like a journey. And your view is actually an acronym. VIEW stands for vision. What's the picture of your life and how work fits into it? I stands for insight. As Michael and I were just talking about getting feedback, what insight do you have about when you're your best self? E is for engagement. In that week, I take you through a process of trying to pinpoint how you could squeeze more development opportunity out of your current role. And W is for will. Will is how you find those inner resources to choose your mindset and actions So that's VIEW, take charge of your VIEW. And I wrote it because organizations aren't providing those career tools, and employees aren't always thinking about how they can create their own engagement. And I'm hoping that this can be a tool for employees and their leaders to find the win-win in that relationship.
Where can we pick up the book?
It's available on Amazon.com, and you can also purchase it on BarnesandNoble.com. And if you live in Greater Boston area, you can stop by Newtonville Books and Brookline Booksmith.
Great. All right. And how would somebody reach out to you to pursue the topics we've spoken about today more in depthly?
I'd love to hear from you. I'm at lisa@PryerConsulting.com, and you can visit our website at PryerConsulting.com, and that's Pryor with an I.
Great. Lisa, thanks for being a guest.
Michael, thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Lisa Pryor, founder, CEO, Pryor Consulting, PryerConsulting.com. Segment has been brought to you by WFN1.